I'm Deborah Munitz. I live in the village of Montebello. When I came up here, I thought I was moving into Suffern, as many people do, and then I found out that I was in another village. I still have Suffern 901 on my mail, and I consider myself a member of the Suffern community. I don't know how many people are really aware of just how many villages are in the town of Ramapo or know very much about the town of Ramapo. And a lot of this is up on the website, but I'm going to do a real quick revamp just to make sure everyone sort of sees things from the right perspective. The town of Ramapo is the single largest town in the state of New York outside of Long Island. Overall, we are the 8th in the entire state of New York, and there are 932 towns in the state of New York. So, you know, there are laws in place as to how towns are run. Towns are run under New York state law, and the reason we're here tonight is because the overriding law in New York State is that when a town is first formed, it defaults to an at-large voting system. Okay, that means that everybody in the town votes for all of the council members. Okay, we also default to 4 council members. And there are provisions in the law. If you want to expand the board, you do it through a referendum that can be initiated by the town board or by the people. If you want to switch to the alternate form, which is the ward system, that can be initiated by a referendum, either initiated by the town board or by the people. So some people would make you believe that this is some kind of cockamamie idea that, you know, some activists thought up in their head, but it's not. This is provisions in the town law as to how we vote our town council members in. The town board is not the school board. It's not village boards, okay? You have different layers of government, and these different layers really cover different things. And there is some amount of interaction, but they are really all very separate governmental, or I don't know about the school board if you'd call it governmental, but they're different, you know, different powers that oversee things. So the ward system is only about the makeup of the town board. Even though people are in villages, we all pay taxes to the town, okay? And we all get, depending upon which village you're in, you get different services from the town. The town basically has the laws for the entire town, and unless a village specifically overrides those laws, and some villages were specifically formed to override zoning and planning laws, okay, the town decides those laws. Similarly, the town has the assessor's office in it. So the town basically is in control of how your properties are assessed. And even your village taxes, you know, kind of flow from those assessments. So there's actually a tremendous amount of power at the town board. And the town board also controls who gets put on the town planning board and the town zoning board. And they would have you think that it doesn't matter to you. You should not be interested in this because you have, the villages have their own planning and zoning boards. The problem is that the town actually oversees a lot of property outside of the villages that are immediately adjacent to the villages. So once you get kind of past the thruway, you know, you've got Suffern here, and then you got that little pocket of Hilburn, and then you got the pocket of Sloatsburg, but all that open area, all that rural open area is the town of Ramapo. Like I was saying with Patrick Farm, that is a property that is completely surrounded by the village of Wesley Hills and the village of Pomona, and you have, you know, scenic district road laws that are supposed to keep things rural, and, you know, someone took care of St. Lawrence way back when, and in 2004 he downzoned it from 2 acres to 1 acre, you know, 1 acre, and the town board has that authority to do so. And then when they wanted some higher density housing, they came to the town board and they said, hey, we want this higher, we want you to rezone it. And that was a decision that was made at the town board, and it has tremendous impact on the village of Wesley Hills and the village of Pomona and the village of Suffern, because we all get flooded. You know, when the Mawa River flows, we all get flooded. So even though they kind of oversee those things, the villages are affected. So we need to be involved in our town board, and unfortunately, there's a certain amount of apathy. So there are things going on in the town board. People read the papers. Most people are not happy. When I ask pretty much anyone on the street, people do not feel represented. People feel that they are not heard, they feel that their vote does not count, and that there is nothing that can be done because we have certain communities in the town of Ramapo who are very, very organized. They turn out huge percentages at each election, and they vote in a block, okay? And so when you hear about this concept of block voting, that basically is when, you know, a community who wants to get something done votes as a block to get something done. What we're trying to do here is to say, you know, we need our own voting power. And the truth is, the interests of Suffern are not the interests of Spring Valley. And the interests of Spring Valley are not the interests of Pomona, okay? The town of Ramapo is very large. It is very diverse. We actually live in one of the most diverse communities in all of New York State. So this ward system was specifically designed for large towns who have diverse communities, you know, and there are a lot of strengths of it. And at its heart, the idea is that you break up the town into equal voting segments. And, you know, the intent is to follow community lines so that similar minorities or similar communities with similar interests can vote and actually get representation on the board. If you look, I've been told by opponents that, oh, this is going to be a problem with the Voting Rights Act. And I did some research on the Voting Rights Act. And the truth is, there are many, many cases that have been sustained specifically because at-large voting is considered to generally be very bad for minority rights. So if anybody ever says to you that this is, you know, not good for minorities, they're wrong. That this is in any way, shape, or form unfair, they're wrong. What's unfair is when you start to look at a map and you see who voted for the incumbents in the past, go back like 4 or 5 elections now, and you see who keeps coming out again and again for the incumbents, we have certain communities that are very well served. They're very well served, they're very well represented. But for instance, like you look at just Sloatsburg, you know, is an extreme case where they actually had record, in the last 2013 election, you had a record turnout. 65% in our area is a record turnout. I mean, we may not be 80, 90% like some communities, but that's a very healthy turnout. And the percentage who voted for the challengers were above 80%. So when you have that kind of turnout and those kinds of, you know, votes that are coming in, you know that that community is not represented. And that story is played over and over again in all of the villages. So when you look at how Airmont came out in 2013, and you look at, and Montebello, and even, you know, Wesley Hills is a little mixed because you start to have some confusion there, and you had some very heavy turnouts for the Republicans because Copeland was from, you know, that area. The truth is, when you really look at it, our outer communities, our outer villages, don't have representation on the board. The board looks like it has representation. We have a black woman who would appear to look like she might represent Spring Valley, but Spring Valley did not vote for her. Okay, you've got Pat Withers, who used to run Ireland's, and you would think that he is there representing Suffern, but nobody voted, you know, he did not get the vote. Okay, you've got Yitzi Ullman, who does represent his community, and, you know, is actually, you know, votes accordingly. And then you've got Daniel Friedman, who I sometimes wonder if he knows who he's representing. But, you know, it looks very diverse, but it's really the same group of people that are voting for these people. And under a new system, they can all run again, and they can all be voted for again. And if anybody wants to vote for them, they will not lose that opportunity to run. The key thing is that what we're trying to do is open up other opportunities for people like you and me to run, or, you know, for professionals, people who are accountants, people who are just, you know, have a civic-minded. You know, I've spent way too much time over the years, you know, volunteering, and, you know, there are people who head up PTAs, people who work in village governments, who are very civic-minded, who really understand what it takes to run budgets. People who are on the school board, you know, talk about running and trying to, you know, keep track of a large budget. These people are very skilled. What goes on in the town of Ramapo is not rocket science, and you have people who are there who don't necessarily have legal backgrounds, accounting backgrounds, executive backgrounds, I mean, you wonder why they're there. And they're there because we have some very strong, politics going on. And, it takes a lot of money to run in the town of Ramapo. And for anybody who's ever been, if someone came up to you and said, hey, why don't you run? Think about trying to market yourself to 63,000 voters in the single largest town outside of Long Island. And there is no way that you could sell yourself to someone in Spring Valley honestly and say, I'm going to represent you, and then turn around to somebody in Montebello and say, I'm going to represent you too. It's a fallacy. So the idea of the ward system is to switch this new system, break up the town into wards, and it's very important that we go to 6 councilmen at the same time. The size of the town demands it, the diversity of our communities demand it, and the truth is what we really, really need is to be able to get enough voices on the board that when it comes to voting supermajorities, that these are meaningful supermajorities. So right now, Christopher St. Lawrence can override the tax cap with 2 votes, okay? And he always has 2 votes. There is nothing that this man wants to do that has ever been turned down. And that doesn't mean that everything he wants to do is wrong, okay? And I'm not going to bash him and say everything he wants to do is wrong. What I am saying is that there's no discussion. There's not even a pretense at discussion. They make up their mind, they come in, they'll hold the obligatory public hearing. I've been to many of them. They don't discuss it. And that's wrong, okay? That's just not what a democracy is about. So there were this whole concept of a referendum was put forth to the town many times. If you read in the papers, you'll see that this was tried several times and then wasn't tried for a while. And 2 gentlemen, Michael Perrietti, who ran for supervisor in 2013 against St. Lawrence on the Preserve Rockland ticket, and coupled with Bob Romanowski, who was a Republican who was running for council on the Republican ticket. And these 2 gentlemen were like, you know what, we're going to try this again. And they did put together petitions, and they got thousands and thousands and thousands of signatures. And they went into this knowing that the town of Ramapo was going to toss it out. But this time, they were prepared to go to the courts. And they had done a lot of homework over the years, and they were prepared to duke it out. And the goal was to put it on the 2012 general election, okay? And the town squashed it, and I could go into a whole long saga of everything that happened, and we had Hurricane Sandy. It was a crazy time period, and the town managed to keep it off of the general election of 2012. And it's been in the courts ever since, and this summer the judge basically approved it, and it's really very unfortunate that she didn't honor the spirit and the intent and put it on the general election this fall. That's where it really belongs. This whole concept of a special election at an oddball time with no notice is, the town is betting on that nobody will know. And the reason I started the website is because I want everybody to know. I believe that if people just generally understand what this means, that people will be in favor of it, because I think that everybody has enough sense of what's been going on to understand that this is something that's very necessary for our community. We've had politicians come out this past week. We've had Ellen Jaffe, Zabrowski on the Democratic side. We've had various people running for office, some people in office, putting their names out there. We've had Republican candidates, the Republican committee. This is a nonpartisan issue about good government, and if it passes, nothing will actually happen for a couple years, okay? It will not affect the November elections. It just won't. There's state law that says that it will not affect anything. You have to have it passed at least 120 days before the election, and things are what they are, and this is not 120 days before November. So this will not affect the next election, and it will be business as usual while the wards would be worked out. State law says that the Board of Elections is going to pick the wards, and it needs to be contiguous, and it needs to have equal numbers of voters, and the town of Ramapo was scared enough that this might pass, that they passed a law stating that they wanted to use home rule to override the state law so that they can pick their own boundaries. This is why it's so imperative to pick 6, okay? At the end of the day, nobody wants to go to court, nobody wants to have a battle. You know, even if they start gerrymandering things, you really need at least 6 to keep things, you know, somewhat under control and to be able to get the kind of results that the people who are really trying to organize this are trying to accomplish. And the one thing I can tell you is that just as everyone was expecting to have to go to court to make sure that the town was forced to do this, we may have to go to court again to make sure it's done correctly. And there's a lot of people who have the wherewithal and the stamina and the interest who are really going to try and see justice is served. And it's my particular view, people can be worried about all these communities, and you know, people can get crazy all the time. What are they doing? What are we doing? At the end of the day, everybody deserves a voice, okay? This is not about squashing or breaking up or doing anything. This is about making sure that those of us who are not represented finally have our fair shot. And the key message and the only argument that these opponents, there's been within this last couple days, all of a sudden there's been several Twitter feeds that started, and starting this weekend, there was a number of Muncie, like the papers that go out in the unincorporated areas that are carrying ads in English and in Yiddish, and there is no question that there's a counter argument that's trying to be made. And it's unfortunate, like, that they're missing the main message, at least the message that I know that I've been trying to convey, which is that this is an opportunity for everyone to work together. Everyone in the town of Ramapo, no matter where you're from, is concerned about the out-of-control taxes, okay? We're concerned about the fact that we have a rubber stamp board who keeps giving themselves raises, to the extent that the only sane argument is that, oh my God, this is going to cost us so much more money because the council members are paid $35,000 a year plus benefits, okay? And so some people are like, oh my God, how are we going to pay for 2 more people? And the truth is they shouldn't be paid $35,000 a year plus benefits. I don't know what they get here in Suffern, but I'll tell you, in the village of Montebello, these guys don't even get 1/10 of that, and they get no benefits. And you've got really professional, you've got like one of the best neurosurgeons in the state of New York, who's the mayor. You've got professionals, you've got CPAs on the board, you've got, you know, professional people on the board, and we've been running in the Montebello with like the most negligible increases in taxes, you know, not overriding anything. And we're still, like, you know, we're getting awards, and we've got, you know, we're doing, you know, great things with green energy, and we're doing all sorts of wonderful things, and we have great, you know, events, and we just had Montebello Day this weekend, and it's wonderful, and we're doing that without overriding these tax caps all the time. And we're doing that with people who don't need to be paid more than a couple $100 a month, okay, just to do the right thing and to work together, and to communicate well, and to get out newsletters, and to make sure that people know, you know, what's going on, and who actually use the website. So that's what this is about. This is about getting sanity back so that everybody can work together, and people can stop fearing one another, and that we all know what's going on, and we can all become re-engaged and come up with solutions, because we do have financial difficulties here in the town of Ramapo, and we're not going to fix them as long as we have a board who's out of control, doing whatever they want. And honestly, I don't even believe that they're doing, I don't even think that they're doing the right thing by the people who voted them into power. And, okay, she's saying I'm maybe not speaking as closely as I should be, so some people might still not be hearing me. So anyway, I've kind of waxed poetic a bit. I think that the thing to do is to go into the types of questions you have, because that'll sort of, I think, you know, in terms of people's confusions or what it is that they don't understand, I think that if we can get some questions out on the table and start to talk about them, that'll help people get to a point where they're comfortable.
What do you think you're achieving this anti-Semitism? Is that what you're saying?
Well, I don't know. The main messages I've seen so far is I've seen some messages that are, you know, typical, like anti-preserve Ramapo, which is it's just sad, you know, because you know, instead of dealing with the issues, it's an excuse to just blame it on somebody. And the truth is, preserve Ramapo, they can't really do anything with it. I mean, it doesn't give them any power. It doesn't give anybody any specific power. It just provides a new way for us to vote for the councilmen. If we can get the vote out, I do believe there's a good chance of it passing, because when you look at the numbers, you know, the truth is when you speak to people who do not feel represented, people are very enthusiastic about this. The key problem is getting the word out, and I don't know if you've noticed, but this is not on the Town of Ramapo website. It's not on the Town of Ramapo calendar. There's been no notice that's been sent out in any way, shape, or form. I tried to call into the supervisor. I tried to talk to Daniel Friedman last week to ask, you know, can we work together? Can I help you to do a mailing? Because they can do election mailings very inexpensively, like the ones we get with our polling districts. Those are very, very inexpensive, and, you know, at least just to let people know. You don't have to say anything one way or another. Just let people know. And I think that what's very telling is that when I called in on Friday and spoke to him, you know, he used it as an opportunity to blame, you know, the powers that be, that this is going to cost the Town of Ramapo so much money, when the reality is the only reason it's costing the Town of Ramapo any money is because they fought so hard to keep it off the general election. It's completely their fault that they did not do this properly. And then to spend that much money and not spend another $10,000 or less to put out postcards is the most infantile thing I've ever heard of.
Could this be passed, let's say, and then be overruled, like later, another vote, and then turned back the other way?
Yes, I suppose it could be, but you have no idea how difficult these things are. And the truth is, you know, I don't know what everyone's so afraid of. I really think that, you know, once you start to see it evolve and you look at it, and, you know, people will think about, you know, strategies within it. I mean, you have to understand, Spring Valley will finally get a say on the board, you know, between Kaiser, the unincorporated area, New Square, the Hasidic, they will have several votes on the board. They're very large, and they deserve a voice on the board. They will not lose any representation and voice. The key thing is, you know, what about, you know, there are Orthodox people who never know what to do, and they feel like very, you know, that they've been left out of this thing. And the truth is, there's no reason that they shouldn't also be on the board. And this area in Western Ramapo that's really never had a voice, barely had a voice, should also have a voice. And the same thing goes for Airmont and Chestnut Ridge, which are huge communities that are traditionally not represented.
I have a couple of things to say. Number one, the present administration in Town of Ramapo, we know how crooked they are by the way they run things, change things. You were tonight to say they're crooks and run by a sect that runs the whole.
But that feeling that you have, yes, there is a reason that people feel that way, and it's because there is nobody countering. If the administration could go ahead and constantly make decisions and do things, and nobody's getting the word out, and nobody's saying, hey, wait a second, you know, don't do that, that doesn't help, you know, then yes, they're going to continue to do things that nobody trusts. And you know what? The only way to get trust back in the town is to be able to open up the board and to have representation, and to not be in a situation anymore where we feel that you can't trust anyone. And even if there's only one or two people you feel you can trust, it's about getting that communication going. And maybe I am too nice, but you know what? There's never a reason. You know, these things take ages to take place, and we all have to move forward.
Unfortunately, you got to be as tough as your opponents.
I don't know.
And they definitely have got to go down, because our Town of Ramapo has got to change.
I believe the Town of Ramapo has to change.
They will squelch it.
You know what? Call me an optimist, but I really believe that properly educated people who feel that they understand an issue will finally have the courage and confidence to talk to their neighbors and actually forward the emails and, you know, encourage people to come out, not because they're filled with hate, but because they're really encouraged and they want to be part of making a difference. And you know what? There are people who are going to be saying those messages, and I'm just not going to be a part of it. I don't think it's necessary, and that's why, you know, I know that, you know, there are people who are concerned about some of the vitriol that's been going on, and I just won't do it.
I have 3 questions.
Go ahead.
My first question is, was there any way to reconsider moving into the general election? Is there some weird barrier? Like, what can you do about that?
The problem is that Judge Garvey made a decision, and the Town of Ramapo elected not to appeal it. And therefore, you know, they would have had to take it, the people like this Michael Perrietti and Bob Romanowski, who had gotten this finally, you know, they finally won. What are you going to do? You have this judge who's finally like, yes, you're right, this has to be done, and then you're going to sit there and say, let me appeal this again? Because it would have, if it had gone to appeals, there's no way it would have made it onto this general election no matter what, and it would have just kicked this can down the road.
If we fail now, do we have the power to put it on the general election for next year? Like, do we have it again?
Yes, but if you did it again, you might potentially have to go through all of this insanity in Michigas again. And you know what? I think that there's enough people now who understand it, that it could take place, and that's why I'm saying I don't think that this is a done deal one way or another. But I think the key thing is to focus on, like, doing it now. I think that's the key thing, is just focus on doing it now.
Okay, so then if I focus on that, my next question is, isn't it not illegal for the Town of Ramapo to refuse to post this election that has been approved to be held on September 30th on their website? Is there some way to hold their feet to the fire to make sure they do it?
The answer is that they have to legally publish notice, and this is why I believe there needs to be other people on the board, because right now they choose most of the time to do things to the letter of the law, but certainly they very, very rarely ever do things to the spirit of laws. And I was literally on the phone on Friday morning with Christopher St. Lawrence asking him, why is it not on the website? Why is it not here? Why have you not sent out an email to the people who have specifically opted in and want these announcements? And he couldn't even be bothered to put it on the September calendar.
Can we demand that mailing go out somehow?
I foiled the email list, and if I get it, I will send out a very polite informational message. Getting mailings out there I personally threw my feet into the fire 3 weeks ago, and I've done a website, and I've done flyers, and I've gotten, you know, a lot of stuff done. I do know that there will be a mailing, and I was given some copies of it.
Well, you've done a lot. I don't even know.
There are other things.
Why can't we get the Town of Ramapo to do it again?
Because they don't want to.
Aren't they
They legally have to publish notice in LOHUD 10 days before the election, and I think you can all just keep calling, but at a certain point it becomes too late.
Tell us who to call and what to say. I mean, you can have 50 people.
I will tell you at this point, tomorrow is 1 week before the election, and the holidays are coming up this week, and it's just not going to happen because even the mail houses, you know, everything goes through Muncie Post Office, and a lot of people are going to be taking off for the holidays. Sorry, there are the other people. Okay, go ahead.
My last question. I just want to say I'm Steve in Blackburn. I moved here 3 years ago from New York City. I live right on the cusp of Chestnut Ridge and Pearl River. I have 2 children that should be starting kindergarten right now, but I can't possibly feel a really good conscience to send her to the school system the way it is right now. So I'm here because I'm a parent that's concerned, and I feel like there's a huge injustice that's happening here and lack of representation and disenfranchisement. I called into the Brian Lehrer show, like 12 hours after finding out about this campaign the other morning, and at least put the website out on the Brian Lehrer show on WNYC earlier this week.
It was great.
I'm trying to get, thank you, you must be.
I'm Deb, yeah.
So I'm trying to get the News 12 to cover it.
Mm-hmm.
If they're interested, have you gotten?
I think News 12 might be covering the Hillcrest meeting on Wednesday night.
Okay, so my last question is this, and then I'll be not learning before. So if you imagine Town of Ramapo being like divided up into a pizza pie, and they're 6 pieces. But 2 pieces have 200,000 people each in them, right? So if we do this vote on the 30th, I would love it to be really a real fair thing. It would somehow show the percentage of people, of eligible voters in each pizza slice that voted, that said they want representation for their ward, to have a representative. Because otherwise, it doesn't make sense if 2 pieces out of the pie have 200,000 people each and the other pieces of the pie have 20,000 people each. Of course the thing would never pass. So I don't understand how the vote would work.
Okay. Let me answer one other question, then I'll try and answer that, because that's a little bit of a mouthful. Real quick, this poor lady's been trying to get a question out.
One of the things that I have found in talking about the wards is nobody seems to know the divisions.
Right.
What streets, how it's divided up.
And the correct answer is you can't know, because it won't be decided until afterwards, and it will be decided by other people. I have personally spent a lot of time analyzing and looking at the election districts and the populations and who's in which election district and how do people vote to come up with what I think would be a very reasonable breakdown, and I hope that I'll have enough time to actually put out an article this week on that, because I do think that's a big question. But the truth is I can do that, and I wouldn't put it into any other framework other than a well-thought-out article where I could share my thoughts so that people would really understand where it's coming from. Because no matter what you do, no matter who does it, Board of Elections, Town of Ramapo, it doesn't matter, there will always be someone who is going to feel disenfranchised, because it doesn't really matter what you do. You cannot possibly get it exactly right. That's just not possible. But the one thing I can tell everyone is that and this is one of the reasons why I keep saying it's really important to go to 6, is that if you can break it down sufficiently so that, we really kind of get communities that are similar and feel similar, even if you're not in the right district, like even if you don't feel that you are represented by whoever gets voted by that particular district, the very fact that there are other people on the board where you can take your opinions is so, so very important. So right now, I don't particularly like my legislative district, representative at Rockland County. I very, very rarely, am in sync with the way he's voting. And when I go and send him my comments and say, hey, I'm not happy with how you handled something, I copy every other person on the county legislator, because I know that I may not be represented by this particular person, but I know other representatives who do, and I know that it's important for me, even if it's just Clarkstown or if it's that there are other people who can keep rational thought processes into play.
But somebody had suggested that they break it up by election districts.
It has to be broken up. You have to understand, this is what happens, and people don't always understand it, is that when you look at, in 2010, you had the census. And we have these censuses on an ongoing basis. And, voting districts are meant to reflect population changes. And we keep having, if you have new development, you have a whole new community where there was no community before, you need to have a way of fitting them into an election district. And sometimes, it becomes unfair if you don't do it. So election districts have to be able to reflect things like the school board. They have to be able to reflect so that you can break up the election districts into school districts. You have to be able to break them up into villages, so villages can have their own elections. You have to be able to break it up so that, they follow, communities, for other, for whatever purposes. You don't want them to be too big, because then you can't match them up. And you need to be able to sort of piece them together and make legislative districts. So you have election districts are the tiniest unit, okay? And some election districts have 2 voters in it. And then there are other ones that have 1,500. Overall, you're talking about a few hundred here or whatever, and they're not that extreme, but not all of the if you have an election district that's right in the center of an area that, it's very neatly in this area, you don't have to break it up. But the election districts are coupled together, and it's not that there's one election district would become a ward. Some of them, you have 63,000 voters. So how do you piece together areas that would add up to about 10,600, plus or minus a few percentage? So maybe you have one that has 10,400 and one that has 10,700. You know, you'd probably want, you know, we have certain areas that are growing very quickly. You wouldn't want to outgrow it, so maybe you'd start a little tiny bit less because they're going to grow, and you want it to always reflect population. There's logic to how this can be done. The question is whether the powers that prevail are going to be logic, and you'll never have a situation that you're concerned with, Tegan, where, you know, you're going to have like 20,000 in one and not in the other. That is simply illegal. Okay, and you're not going to have a situation where, let's say they wanted to take half of Spring Valley and put it in one and half of Spring Valley and put it in another, so that, you know, the black people never get that. You know, that becomes a you know, Voter Right Act issue, Section 2. You know, at-large voting is singularly the worst atrocity when it comes to minority rights. And when people think of minorities, they always think of black people, or they think of, you know, like in our, we don't have a situation where, you know, our Jewish populations are a minority here, but in some areas they do. And when you go in and you try and break up these minority populations, you know, that becomes a Voting Rights Act issue. But the point is, minority rights can be very different. We have people in our community who want large parcels of land and single-family homes. We have some people who want to live down near Route 59 and be near the train station, like here in Suffern, and we have some people who want to be out in the middle. So, you know, the truth is, our interests are what makes us a community. And, you know, there are lots, it's like a Venn diagram, you know. You might have people up in Wesley Hills that want sidewalks because it's a very orthodox population, but they still want a low-density housing. And then you have other people who want higher-density housing because you have much more need, and they want sidewalks. So, yeah, both groups may want different densities, but they both want sidewalks. So there are overlapping interests throughout the county. And the one thing I can tell you is that everybody wants less taxes. Okay, everybody wants, you know, nobody wants things to be run into the ground. So I think that that's one thing that, you know, we all want to get a handle on it. And nobody wants to be unfair and, you know, start tossing people out and not having good services, because that just makes everybody batty. But the truth is, you know, some jobs that are going on are absolutely instrumental, and you've got great people working in the town of Ramapo, and then sometimes there are superfluous jobs or maybe superfluous things going on. We know right now that if you look at, there was an article done in February about some of the pay increases that are going on, and while everybody else is barely surviving on a percentage or two, and we're all dying here, and we've got some people who are getting these massive, massive pay raises. And right now, the single biggest complaint that people have about doing 2 extra wards is like, oh my God, it's going to cost money. But I'm telling you, one, all of the councilmen should be making less, and 2, it doesn't matter. You know, if I have to pay an extra $20 a year in my taxes to get 2 more people so that everyone feels that they're representative and that we start to have some peace and we start to work cooperatively, it's worth every single penny extra that I spend. If we can finally get to the point where I feel like I can trust our town government. Yeah.
Is it possible, there were 2 propositions, is it possible for the increase to be 6 members and the other party to fail?
Yes, it is possible. These two questions are independent.
So what happens then?
Well, I can tell you, I highly doubt that one will pass and the other one will fail. Huh?
6 at large.
Right. Then that's what will happen. And, you know, the truth is, you know, it's not going to be worse, you know. I'm telling you, things are really, really lousy now. You know, I'm going to tell you, here's the thing. People have not been engaged. We need to engage. People need to pay attention. Sometimes you do need big things like this. You know, they always say, you know, significant emotional events, so you have a divorce, a death in the family, and all of a sudden people, you know, move on, and they actually sometimes do better, and they become much more accomplished, and they use these things as an impetus to do great things. I really hope that no matter what happens, that this will be a great impetus for people to continue forward and do great things. But this is very doable. This is about everybody getting involved and not being afraid to be able to tell people and ask people and offer people help. And, you know, it's like me putting up a Facebook page and having people do the like. I'm going to tell you, there are thousands and thousands and thousands and thousands of people who like this idea. You get 350 likes. You know, people are just afraid. And I don't know why that people are afraid. But you need to make sure that people understand things so that they're not afraid and that they feel confident and you know, that we can all move forward and feel good about this. And have that energy. You want to have that energy that you're doing something really good and that you don't question it and that you feel like it's worth spending an extra hour of your time handing out literature or talking to your neighbors, because God knows why we're afraid to talk to our neighbors. You want to say, you know, you're afraid of like block voting? You know what? It's great. They have great neighborhoods. They support one another. They're completely comfortable talking to one another all the time. It should be that way everywhere. I applaud that. Okay, and I don't think there's anything wrong with this, and I think we all need to do a lot more of that, okay?
I do talk to a lot of my neighbors, and the main question that comes up, and you started to address it, and the question over there started to address it, how will the districts be made up? Will it be geographic? Will it be by number?
It has to be by number. Okay, so no matter what the result is, it has to be by number. You know, that's ultimately the final law. You can't have it be, you know, non-contiguous, and it's supposed to be representative of communities. So the question is, you know, how would one person argue the logic of a particular breakup? I could certainly come up with, I think, a really very logical and very fair way of breaking it up. And I know then you get like Phil Tisi, who turns to someone and is like, oh, well, we're just going to do stripes all over the place, and we're going to do all this cockamamie stuff. And yes, it's hyperbole, but, you know, would they do something like stupid like that? If they did, you go to court, it would be so easy to fight it. If people really did something that exaggerated and stupid, it would be very easy to fight. We've already voted when we bought our homes where we want to live and what we want our communities to be. We did that when we bought our homes. I wanted to live in Montebello, okay? There are people who buy their homes in Wesley Hills, okay? Yes, some neighborhoods are shifting and changing, and that maybe that argument doesn't come into play there. But the truth is, you know, neighborhoods have logic to them. And yes, there are shifting neighborhoods and things are not exact, and it will never be exact. And I don't think people should fear the fact that it may be, you know, not exact. The goal is to get it mostly right. Get it mostly right and have things move forward and open up the government so that we have people who can get in there, roll up their sleeves, want to do work, be willing to communicate with their neighbors. If 10,600 people vote for someone, you have that opportunity that I probably could turn to anybody in this room and say, we know some one person in common. And that if you ever wanted to vet me or if I wanted to vet you, that somehow we would find someone in common. Okay, I can't say that in Spring Valley. Like, I could never go to Spring Valley and say, I know that we know somebody in common. It could be 2, 3, 4 degrees of separation. Okay, and what we want is to suddenly get to a point where we have communities where we do feel we know each other and that we're not asking our representatives to pretend to represent very, very different interests and you know, and try and be fair to everyone. Doesn't mean every vote's going to go the way you want, but you want it to be fair. That's what democracy is about. That's really what it's about. Sorry, this guy's had his hands up.
Here in Suffern, knocking on doors every weekend. And what I found is when in addition to talking about my qualifications, I talk about this wardrobe. And overwhelmingly, I found that people are excited about it, they're knowledgeable about it, and they're ready to go out on September 30th to vote. So I tell you this because, not to quell your enthusiasm, but to say that there is a groundswell happening.
A very big groundswell.
I saw it myself, that people know it's coming, and I say this to implore you to double your efforts, redouble your efforts, and get out there and tell everybody that you know, because it's happening.
You're not going to turn to somebody. I mean, I have to tell you, I think I've probably talked about this issue with at least over 1,000, if not more people in the last couple weeks. And I think I've run into 2 people who were not in favor of it. And it was because they were really confused, and they kept thinking it was about the school system. The school system. I was talking to somebody in the East Ramapo School District, and they were and I kept saying, this is not about school taxes. It's not. There's all manner of problems in the East Ramapo School District, and you can go crazy, and it's so complicated. But the one thing I can say is this is easy because it has nothing to do with East Ramapo School District, and whether everybody thinks their school district taxes are too high. I'm going to tell you right now, my school district taxes are too high. There's nobody that doesn't feel that. What?
We have to find where to vote. Does everyone know where to vote?
Anywhere, you go to where you would go for the general election. It took a while to get it confirmed, but it is confirmed. I did get, finally I got the Schedule A, and I confirmed on the website. I took those normal polling locations, put them up on the website. Those are the regular ones for the election, and when I compared it to the Town of Ramapo list, all of the normal polling locations are planned to be open. And, look, to say things, in their defense, they wanted to make sure that, nobody was going to invalidate it because they didn't open it long enough. It's going to be open from 6 in the morning until 10 at night. You know what? If you have an excuse that you can't get there by 6 in the morning or 10 at night, there are absentee ballots, and you can still vote. And you can literally walk in tomorrow if you're going to be out of town. And I ask every one of you to do this. My son's coming home for the holidays, and he's going to go into the Town of Ramapo, and he'll fill out his application form, and they'll give him a ballot on the spot, and he'll vote on the spot. And that's absolutely, something that you can do if your work is going to take you elsewhere or whatever. Hold on one second, Carol.
When we talk to people, our neighbors, and people at church, we have to rephrase, because the word ward sounds so negative.
It sounds ominous, right?
There's another, a ward is really a district.
It's a district.
So we do have to watch how we present it.
Mm-hmm. And you know why that is? That's because of, they had there was, way back when in history, you had certain municipalities like Chicago and whatever, the ward system, and sometimes there was, various stories, and it sort of lent itself this, this connotation that's not wonderful. But you know what? It is. It's just a legislative, it's just an electoral district like what we do in Rockland County. It's no different. You just have to call it something different so people don't get confused, but, hey, Charles?
Getting back to the district, there's 125,000 voters.
No, there isn't.
Residents.
Okay.
3,000 voters. I'm under the impression that this is split by residents, not particular voters.
Well,
About 22.5 or more.
It's a really interesting question that's been put forth, and there are some articles that are out there, and it's an imprecise, when you look at the Constitution, everything is supposed to be by population. That's the whole point of representation. When it comes to the practicalities of how Board of Elections operate, they don't really know other than by voters. So, to some degree, their assumption is, the assumption is right now, a voter, it's like one vote per person. It's imprecise. You could go in, it's not that far off, and, it is a reasonable approximation. It becomes really problematic in minority districts, and you start getting into some really weird laws, like, when you have large populations of, people who move in, or, you may have completely legal, let's say, Spanish people, Latinos who just aren't engaged and, are not registered, and you may be underrepresented. That's a big problem. And you hear about it, across the United States when it comes to elections, That's why you need to encourage everybody to register. Everybody should be registered to vote, and we do need to do more of that to make sure that we have a good population that's registered. Does anybody else have questions about what a ward system is, or what it means to have 6? Do people understand, even when I say a supermajority or a majority vote, do people understand what that means? So if you have 4 people on the board, and they're split, right? You have 2 and 2, the supervisor gets a vote so that you can break the tie. So if 3 people out of 4, vote for something, the supervisor doesn't need to add his vote, okay? Because you already have a majority, okay? So 50%, 51%, it's a majority. Supermajorities require that right now you have 60%. So if you have 3 people, supervisor and 2 people, you can have a supermajority. Just, even if the board is split, you can have a supermajority. Supermajorities are needed to do things like override tax caps, or to override, like if there's some legal issues that the Rockland County has said, hey, you're not following, let's say state law. Because municipalities like the Town of Ramapo have what's called home rule, they are allowed to sort of override certain governing laws and things, but they have to do so with a supermajority. The problem is when you have a government where they're all in lockstep and they always vote the same no matter what, there's just no discussion. And these supermajorities become somewhat meaningless because you always have a supermajority no matter, and nobody has a say because it's predetermined. And that's the biggest frustration, is that, there really isn't. And that means that they're in a position to do shenanigans, and we all know that there's a big frustration with what happened at the Town of Ramapo with respect to the Orange Avenue. And, Town of Ramapo, there are relationships, and, politicians reach out to one another and ask favors and do things, and next thing you know, you've got the Town of Ramapo making decisions on something where they should never have stuck their nose in there. They should never have done that. And certainly if there had been somebody representing Suffern's interest on the board who could have at least said, whoa, get the word out. There could have been like, thousands of people from Suffern could have showed up at the Town of Ramapo and said, oh, no, you don't, And if there was any thought process that, maybe people would actually do things like this, so maybe the supervisor wouldn't just keep, doing whatever his friends want if we could get people activated. That wasn't in the interest of, Spring Valley. That, it had nothing to do with other communities. It was not in anyone's interest for him to make that move. It was a terrible move, and it was only self-serving, and he took advantage of his position and his authority and his responsibility. And he didn't do it for anybody who he was theoretically representing, whether they voted for him or not. So, let me, this woman in the back, sorry, I'll get to you. Yeah. Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, so I'm one of those people that are not afraid to talk to my neighbors, not afraid to stay on Facebook. So I know that my friends are going to stay. So I'm telling everyone, get out and vote. In a nutshell, I know there's so much more than just a nutshell. What can I say to them to be like, this is why you have to get out and vote? Because I don't care. I always harass people and my friends, and I talk to my neighbors, I talk to everyone.
I just turned to someone, I said, do you feel represented? Do you feel that the Town of Ramapo represents you? That's it. I think that usually that's the one thing that somebody actually looks and they're like, oh my God, sometimes they don't even think about it. And then they'll say, oh no, it doesn't matter what I do. And it's like, well, wouldn't you want it to matter? That's the point. Wouldn't you want it to matter? Like nobody should feel that way. You want to feel that if you're going to vote, that it matters. And the last thing you want is someone to just sit there and say, oh, I'm going to do nothing.
Smaller elections are even more important, in my opinion, than the bigger ones.
Right.
I'm 41. Most of my friends' kids are school age, and they're not out there. These are educated people that shouldn't be involved.
Because here's the thing. It's really complicated. When you've got 2 people and you don't know much about them, it's like, how do you decide? Right. And it's like we don't really have a good way of getting to know candidates. Because especially when it's so big and broad and like, you're getting people who are not even from your community. Okay, that's the reason we want to do this, okay? So this is a simple issue. I'm not asking you to choose between 2 people you don't know. It's a simple issue that you can very easily understand. And then that's it. This is a one-time shot to get involved in making a decision that you can understand, okay? And you don't have to, it's not like it's not a personality, it's not who do you like more, it's very simple. You either want it or you don't. Carol? Sorry, she's been trying. Go ahead, Carol.
I just want to get back to the elections and the absentee ballot, because a lot of people don't realize.
Okay, hold on one second. Guys, if there's anybody here who would like literature, signs, or handouts, please, before you leave, I know you guys got to get home to kids and whatever, and I don't expect to talk. Please grab some stuff. We have door hangers, and if you're willing, if you could do a block or two, that's what we're looking for. As a matter of fact, I think that this would be a really good opportunity, because I'm going to be here answering questions for a while. And I think if people feel settled and understand what the issues are, I think the key thing is, what can you do? Yes, what we really need to do at this point is there will be a mailing going out, but literally, I stood in the supermarket and on Saturday, and I didn't have a lot of time to do it, but I did talk to people for a while, and I would still say that, 25% didn't know. They just didn't know. I think the key thing is you have to email everybody you know. Don't assume that everybody knows. Don't assume that everyone's, and I think that it's not just sharing information, it's saying, I'm sharing this information, and if you don't feel that you understand it, please call me. I haven't talked to you in a while. Call me. It will be divided up by population.
So that might be like, if there's a really densely populated area, there might be like a ward that's drawn up.
Some wards will be huge. The ward that includes the election district that includes Harriman State Park is going to be massive because there's nobody there. And the ones that are going to be around the more dense communities are going to be smaller from a geographic standpoint. So when you look at it, it won't, I went with that abstract, I just sliced up, because it was meant to be abstract. You don't want people overthinking this or whatever, because you can't answer that question. But the truth is, it will not look like a pizza pie. That was purposely abstract.
Can we sign our names to a certain area?
Yes. Yes. Okay, guys, let me just talk to everybody here. Hold on one second. Sam, if anybody is grabbing enough stuff that they're willing to do their community, the one thing I would ask, and you don't have to do it this second, okay, is please drop an email tomorrow, go through the site, drop me an email, and just let me know, I took enough flyers to cover this and this block. I took enough flyers to cover this and this block. Just so that we know, because when people are asking me, what can we do, I can say, hey, what would you be like? Oh, don't do that block, do another block. And don't be afraid to go outside your community. Honestly, there's a lot of communities that just, are not as organized, so you reach out and talk to anybody in other communities. Go ahead, hold on one second, Carol. What do you need? Go ahead. Phyllis, go Phyllis.
Right. Are you aware, and I was really surprised, that the school systems have said papers home to vote yes?
The school system. Okay, the school systems have not done that, but some of the PTAs are allowed to do that. The school itself does not do that, but some of the PTAs have done that, and they have backpacks, and they've done that.
And the other question I have for you is there a concern that at the polls, the day of the election, you're not going to have
Poll watchers?
Yeah.
Yes, there is a concern.
What does one do?
I know that there is an effort going on. I don't know if it will be successful or not. They'll be in front of the judge on Wednesday as to whether or not they can force poll watchers. I mean, you have to understand, the Town of Ramapo is just not, they're doing whatever is the most minimum, and it's so unfortunate because, and I tell everybody, and I'm not afraid to talk to them, I really think that this is a missed opportunity for them to, reconnect and show that, well, they don't.
One place in particular, right on Parkside, someone is constantly on putting it up, they're pulling it down.
We have a lot of problems with people taking down sides.
I don't know what it is, it's got to be someone who lives right there.
It's true. It is really disgusting that people have to resort to those tactics.
What's the best website to be able to look at the borders of the town of Ramapo? Again, I've been here for years.
Okay, it's super easy, Tegan. You go to the Rockland County website, type in Rockland County GIS, and you can get very, very detailed maps of all the municipalities in Rockland County. Okay, Rockland County GIS, and then type in maps. Okay?
Another place that's good to give this out, and especially this upcoming weekend, are baseball games on the.
Yep.
I'm getting out a whole bunch here in Suffern, so whatever area you're in, if your teams are meeting.
There are baseball games down in the Suffern fields. There's baseball games down in Rella fields. Right, and unfortunately, the East Ramapo Little League is now part of the Ramapo Little League, so they're playing on those fields too. But yes, you know, please, and for anybody who's interested, there will be another meeting on Wednesday night at the Hillcrest Fire Department. On Route 45, it's near a little strip mall with one of the best little Vietnamese restaurants in the area. So.
There's going to be a farmers festival at the co-op on Saturday, the Columbia Hollow Co-op in Chestnut Ridge.
Oh, really? That's great.
So it might be good if anybody wants to fly there. I might be able to do it part of the time, but.
If you could, there will be Suffern Day, is this coming Saturday. So I think a lot of people, at least in this area, will be at Suffern Day. For anybody taking literature, you know, please consider making donations. We're going to be doing another sign run for this week. So there's a donation box on the website.
No, where can we donate right now?
You can hand it to me. Pay for ads. I've been trying to, I did try to submit an ad to one of the Community Connection, and I get I was told they just don't, which is sad, that they use editorial control, and I offered to make any changes necessary, but I somehow am under the impression that they're not going to run it.
Can you give the address and the time for the Wednesday night meeting?
It's on the website. If you go to Route 45 it's kind of near where Viola, I think it's called Eckerson down there, crosses over Route 45 to the north side. There's like you can't miss it. It's a big fire department. It's kind of in that area.
TV station down there, you know, Channel 10?
I don't know. News 12? Yeah, I think there's a possibility News 12 might be coming out on Wednesday.
What time?
7 o'clock.
What time is that?
7 o'clock.
7 o'clock.
I'm going to be there for just a little bit, but I have to have dinner with my family. It's my son's coming home for the holidays, and that's important. It's the Hillcrest Fire Department. It's the big one. It's the main Hillcrest Fire Department one. Yeah, it's down near that area. There's a gas station there, and then there's a fire department there.
There's 99-cent big discount store.
There's a bunch of shopping malls that all.
The biggest area of uninformed voters.
That's definitely an area of uninformed voters in and around that particular Hillcrest area. Certain sections of Chestnut Ridge, okay? Spring Valley, you know, outside of people going to churches and things like that, you know, you've got a very, you know, very busy parents who don't have time. Well, you know, there is a little bit of an attempt. That's why I ask everybody who's willing to do certain areas. Don't go to Hillcrest. If you could do Chestnut Ridge, I do know there's some people who would be doing Hillcrest, okay? No, I haven't done that yet. Do you want to do that, Phyllis? I wouldn't recommend it. I wouldn't recommend it, no. Look, you don't want to offend anybody. There's just no reason. It's so unfortunate. I wish that the powers that be were more open to having discussions, but it's really, you know what, there's a lot of things that could and should be done. It's just the biggest unfortunate thing is that, one, there's no notice, and, you know, that instead of spending the energy to have debates or have like meaningful conversations that, you know, it's just about getting like basic fundamental information out the door.
There's nothing that he could do as good versus what he's done bad. It so outweighs everything.
So he's still talking about saving the power plant, and I can assure you he wasn't the only one doing that.
I can't understand why people.
Okay. I want to make sure everyone feels comfortable going home. I'm going to stay here for a little while. I'd be happy to talk to anybody or answer questions. We do have, like I said, we have door hangers. We have some extra copies. I was given, you know, some flyers that were going to be mailed out. I have small palm cards, like if, you know, just business-sized cards if you want to hold it in your pocketbook so that you just always have something in case, at a certain point, you know, you don't know when you're going to run into somebody who doesn't know, so it's always nice to have like something in your pocketbook. If you could carry something, that would be great. Okay?